Recognize Representative Collier to close.
Well, this is the story of our life, where we don't get meaningful reasoning as to why we are being rejected or opposed. We need to know why this type of provision, which will promote inclusivity, and it will help ensure that everyone's voices is heard. Why is that a problem? We're not hearing that. We just continue to hear you lose, we win, without having meaningful discussions and how this will truly impact our universities and those students and our future generation. Without these offices that promote and foster these conversations and help show the diverse strengths of Texas, we stand to lose. So I ask that you support this amendment that would ensure that our universities reflect the diverse and rich nature of our state.
Question occurs on the Collier Amendment. It's a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Kipple voting no, Representative Schaefer voting no, Representative Collier voting aye. So Representative Morales-Shaw voting aye. Have all voted? It means 60 ayes and 82 nays. The amendment fails to be adopted. Mr. Schaefer? Does anyone else wish to speak on for or against the Kemple Amendment? If not, Chair recognizes Representative Collier to speak against the amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, I have grave concerns about the impact this amendment will have on the funding for our universities. Many of our universities rely on Title III, Title V, and Title VI funding grants. This provision, this amendment, removes those protections that were in the original bill that would allow our universities to comply with any of the terms and conditions of those types of grants. As you know, many of our universities, they don't get 100% funding from the state, not even from the federal government. So there are gaps and needs that our universities have to meet the requirements to provide a quality education. So they look to nonprofits, they look to private corporations, they even look for other grants to help cover those gaps. But that money has conditions. And so in order to comply with those conditions, you have to show evidence that you're complying. And it may be more than just a statement. You heard the author of the amendment state that they're not aware of a grant that requires more than a statement. That doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. There are grants out there that require more than a statement when it comes to showing compliance. So these universities will be non-compliant with those grants or ineligible for those grants. So even though this amendment says that they can apply for grant funding, it does no good if I can't comply with the terms of that grant funding. And that has been removed. Now, if we go back to the original bill that was before us, there was a provision in there that would have covered this. That has since been removed. There is no protection for our universities. I am very concerned that some of our universities will close down because they don't have the appropriate and necessary funding to function. So we need to be very aware, and we're leaving them in the middle of the session, right at the end of the session, where we can't even provide help. So when this bill becomes effective, they will be left high and dry and without funding and opportunities. They may even have to eliminate or send back dollars because they are non-compliant as a result of this amendment. So we need to be aware of what we're about to do. We're not protecting our universities. We're not giving them the exception to comply or the ability to comply. In fact, we're eliminating that.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Rosenthal, for what purpose?
will the lady yield for questions?
Gentlelady yield for questions.
Yes.
She yields.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Collier. I actually would really like to make this body aware of what you're saying right now. Is it my understanding that you're saying that this amendment could cost these universities in terms of the federal funding that we receive?
Yes, absolutely. In fact,
Any idea, like, on the magnitude of that funding? How much money are we standing to lose by incorporating this amendment right now?
Millions. In fact, it's so grave that universities could close down because of the gap in funding, especially with Title III that helps historically black colleges and universities, that they have terms and conditions. We know all money is not free. There are certain things that you have to do to qualify and remain eligible, especially for those dollars that require repeated applications. So while I may be able to apply in year 1, I may not show compliance in year 3. And my failure to show compliance removes my eligibility for that funding and may make me non-compliant to the point where I have to send dollars back to the grant, the federal government, the nonprofit, whoever. And another thing this amendment does, is it removes the ability of someone to apply for or to become compliant with with private dollars. So we have to be very concerned. These options will no longer be available for our institutions of higher education.
Thank you. I think it's really important for us to understand if there's real money on the line and if amendments like this could literally close down universities in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So thank you for bringing that. Thank you.
Yes. So let's just be on record. I mean, literally, let's be aware of what we're doing to these universities. We're eliminating their option. We're removing their local control on how they're going to handle their universities. We're not promoting freedom or restricting freedom by implementing the provisions of this amendment that would force our universities to decline dollars that could help them succeed. And so I ask that you vote against this amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Kimple to close.
Mr. Speaker, move passage.
Question occurs on the adoption of the Kimple Amendment. It's a record vote. Clerk, ring the bell. Show Representative Kimple voting aye, and Representative Collier voting nay, Representative Schaefer voting aye, Representative Harrison voting aye. Show Mr. DL voting aye. Have all voted? 81 ayes and 57 nays. The amendment is adopted. Following amendment, clerk, read the amendment.